don't have to be an expert in motor racing to know the name of Jackie Stewart. He was champion driver 3 times in the late 60s and 70s, and 2 decades later, his fame lives on. His wife Helen met him when he was a complete unknown. There have been moments of real anxiety for her, living with a legend in such a dangerous sport. The rock on which Jackie Stewart's success is built is the love of his family. Oh yes, and his dogs. When they're around, you're guaranteed to see the softer side of a man with something of a macho image.
You went right and they keep your mouth closed.
The boys have grown up. Paul now has his own highly successful motor racing team, hoping to break into Formula One. Mark is building a career in TV. In fact, he helped us shoot this program. And by Jackie's side throughout all those thrilling but dangerous years has been Helen. Together they've shared so many triumphs and known too many tragedies. Ever since the boys were young, home has been a magnificent, secluded house overlooking Lake Geneva with its own swimming pool and tennis court. It's not too far away from some of the finest ski slopes in Europe, and Jackie Stewart knows where his priorities lie, despite all the big headlines and glory that have come his way.
At the end of the day, it's your family. It doesn't matter what everybody else is to you. It doesn't matter how much money somebody has. It's your family that, in most cases, you can totally rely on. And if you can't, it's because you've done it wrong. That you haven't grown up properly together as a family and influenced each other properly and correctly or respectfully. And if you've done all of those things, then the core of your life will in the end be your family. The family unit is the single most important thing in my life.
Motor racing is a glorious self-indulgence, a heady cocktail. But Stewart knows it put a tremendous strain on his family. After 99 Formula One races and 3 world titles, he decided to call it a day.
I think the major reason is that I've retired from my family, for the children and for Helen, because I think that I've been a racing driver long enough. I've enjoyed it enormously, but I think it is my responsibility to retire for their sake, for their future, and for the happiness of the family.
The fact that I was never asked and that I made the decision, because had I been asked and had I been a dutiful husband and father, that I might have said under those pressures that, okay, in that case I'll retire. I forever would have held it against her, perhaps. And forever I would have said, you know, the reason this is happening today, and that's because I retired and I didn't have to, and I only did it for you. That's never been able to be said in the Stewart family. And Helen was incredibly intelligent about that and long-suffering. And I think in that respect, women are so much more intelligent than men.
I never spoke about how I felt with Jackie. I don't even know if he knows to this day. I suppose he does, but it's certainly, I think it'd be more of a hindrance than a help in the success of a driver. I think you have to stand behind him, you have to be strong, and just go along with it, whether you like it or not. I didn't marry a racing driver, but he became one, and I accepted it.
At that stage, the boys were too young to realize all the dangers that went with their father's job. They were growing up in a motorsport environment. The trappings they took for granted. Their dad's hazardous globe-trotting job was, they thought, perfectly normal.
I thought he used to live in an airport, because we used to drop him off at the airport. And you go through this big door, and I honestly thought he lived in the airport.
Jackie and Helen had come a long way from the days when he was a £3 a week petrol pump attendant and she worked in the bank. They remember vividly those hungry years before stardom and success beckoned. Helen grew from total ignorance of the motor racing scene to become a keen observer, even keeping lap charts as Jackie became one of the biggest names in sport.
It's not easy for a racing driver's life. Jackie described himself getting up in the morning as like a bouncing ball, and the time he'd got into a racing car, that ball had deflated. Whereas I was the opposite. The closer it got to the race, the more of a my heart was going. Or I wouldn't allow anyone to speak to me. If anyone came and asked me a question, I would turn away. It wasn't I was being rude to them. It was I didn't want to, and it was all part of my preparation for accepting what Jackie was doing. when the flag dropped, my legs were always like shaking. I don't know what otherwise go through, but that was my experience. The beginning of the race is quite dangerous when they're all together on the corner and you hope they all get through. And then after 2 laps it calms down. During the race, well, if he breaks down, he breaks down. And then you realise he's going to win. Please God, please let him win. Please don't let him break down. Because that's happened before. And then I found myself shaking again, but, just with tension, and there was a lot of cameras on me wanting my reaction, but I didn't want to show it. But I remember my legs were just, again, like, I couldn't stop moving. And yet I was known as one of the coolest ones in motor racing, but in fact I wasn't really, I just didn't show it.
Here he comes, the checkered flag's ready, and Jackie Stewart wins the Monaco Grand Prix for Ken Tyrrell. This puts him well ahead in the World Championship.
In motor racing's jet set, of course, it's almost compulsory for a top driver's wife to be glamorous.
You want to look nice for photographs. You know you're going to be photographed. You say, well, I don't care. I did care. I wore nice hats. I was voted the best hatted lady of Europe. I mean, you have to get dressed in the morning, so you may as well make a bit of an effort and play along the role of being the glamour part of the racing driver. I think it's actually quite nice.
But there is another side. Jackie and Helen lost so many friends in scenes of death and destruction like this, including the great Jim Clark, who was Stewart's mentor.
Fortunately, I didn't think about that too much, because nothing had ever happened. And after the death of Lorenzo Bandini, who's an Italian racing driver, actually happened almost in front of me. And I dwelt on that a long time, and I realized what it was all about, because he was burned to death in the car.
Jochen Rindt was another close family friend to be killed on the track. And after Jackie's much-loved teammate Francois Sever died, Stewart never raced again.
Francois had that crash and he hurt his ankles, and I had to carry him everywhere. So when we went to Niagara Falls after the race, I had to put him on my back and take him everywhere. You and I were there. Ken and Nora came.
Francois took the
picture, yeah. And then we went to Bermuda, remember?
Yeah.
So for him, so he could recuperate. And
all those photographs.
Exactly. And then we stayed a week in Bermuda, and then we went to Watkins Glen. And that's probably about the last picture that was ever taken of Francois at Watkins Glen in practice. And then, of course, that same day, there was this monumental accident. And he was killed immediately.
I don't think you ever come to terms with the danger of it. I was certainly made aware of it many times. I think I appreciated him a lot more than I perhaps would have been married to Joe Bloggs. I appreciated my children and my home and everything we ever did together. And I think that gave me also this, what I always felt was an eternal honeymoon. We had always such fun together, and everything was an adventure. I was with Sally Courage and Nina Rindt, and I said to them, I feel terrible sitting here, I've still got my husband. I said, but don't think I'm not suffering, because I know it can happen to me. And they said, I hope you don't hold it against me. I really felt guilty. And they said, of course not. They didn't think that way. Because I suffered for them and their children.
The driver's children were left to reflect on the tragedies that touched their families. Like Jackie's son Mark and Jochen Rindt's daughter Natasha, who still keep in touch. How could they make sense of it all?
I remember, I think it was Paul and I went up to my father and we said, so when are you going to die? Because it was normal, all drivers died, so when are you going to die? And I think my father was pretty angry, I think, apparently. Not directly to us. I think he thought that my mother had prodded us, but she in fact hadn't. We actually thought, that's the way it was. Jochen had died, and Joe had died, and we assumed automatically that he would be next.
There have certainly been some grim memories, but the Stewarts do always seem to have a recipe for success. And guess what? The family could soon be back in Formula One. Jackie Stewart drives at a rather more sedate pace these days. His lifestyle has changed, but not his home. He's lived in the same Swiss village since 1968. So why did he go there?
In the year that I moved to Switzerland, I earned £100,000. The Labour government were in power, and if I had paid everything as I should have paid it in my taxes, that year I would have paid 93%. So for my family, for my children, and for Helen more than anybody else, had I died, and there was a big chance that that would have happened at that time, how can I leave that family to financial devastation?
But what about Scotland?
I've got everything I want here. I love my country. I'm a very proud Scot and a proud Brit. And I'm still that person. I haven't changed one iota. But this happens to be my residence, as it is for other people to live in a residence which is more convenient for the job that they do. And this is a very convenient place to live. I always think that somebody who really loves dogs can't be all bad. You know, there's a great relationship between a man and a dog, and obviously a woman and a dog. They're tremendous friends, they're always loyal, they're always there. In fact, I say home is where your dog is. It's not where your wife is, it's where your family is, because your wife travels, your children can travel. Your dogs, they don't travel too well. So you come home to your dog. 9.5 on that one.
Jackie and Helen married 32 years ago. This is one celebrity marriage that's made it, despite all the stresses and temptations of his showbiz existence. It's been a hectic adventure, not at all what Helen had in mind as she worked in the bank all those years ago. But all in all, she's glad she married Jackie and not some bank manager.
There's no happy medium, it seems. It seems to be either all out, flat, or sitting back on one's laurels, or you don't achieve anything. He says, yes, there are achievers and non-achievers. And so there is no happy medium. And to be married to someone that did nothing would drive me crazy. I'd rather have him the way he is.
She's had a tough time. To have to come to a country that was not your home and not speak your language and be plonked down and then left alone by some sportsman running off to go and do another motor race. Not very nice. And to have to find new friends and to have to go through all the dramas that she's been through. And of course, it's an affluent life. And I don't want anyone to feel sorry for Helen, but at the same time, I don't think that she's had the easiest life adjusting to all of the change, but she's done it admirably and been a fantastic mother. A lot of people might see Helen as not the toughest person in the world, and she is very sensitive and sometimes very vulnerable, but she's handled life extraordinarily well, and is a credit to the female race in that respect. We're married in August 28th, 1962, so we're 32 years married. It's amazing that I've put up with it this length of time. I've really been wonderful.
The family's wide circle of friends ensured that Paul's wedding to Victoria was attended by showbiz stars and royalty. Paul actually flirted with a career as a driver himself.
The greatest fear I had was when Paul started racing, because I thought, oh my God, it can't be as good again as it's now been for me. And the worst thing that could have happened would have been something to happen to my immediate family. The fear that there was a debt somewhere to be paid, if you like, in life. You know, Helen had been a long-suffering wife, and then to have this euphoria of the rest of her life being normal, suddenly to be thrown back in again with Paul starting to race. I mean, that was unfair. It was his life, and I understood that, and it wouldn't have been right. I tried everything to talk him out of it, but that was unsuccessful, and it was never acrimonious. It was always, you know, something that he had made up his mind to do, and I could not see it in my power to stop him.
I wasn't in favour of it, but I wasn't in favour of his father racing, but I never said anything, really. I thought it was a bit of a shame that he wanted to do the same thing as his father had been so successful at. And I thought, well, he couldn't do much better unless he was another Senna. And of course, I thought, well, he's got to have his chance, and I never complained about it.
I felt it was
it was the right thing to do. And I thought, well, you've got a lifespan, and I would hate to have got to a certain age where I could never race again, or, you know, say it was 60 or whatever, where I say, boy, I wish when I was 17 or 20 or 25, I'd actually been racing. What an opportunity to have let slip. And certainly now I've got no regrets in the decision I made. I'm sure my father hasn't got any regrets about the decision I made.
Of course, Paul had a tough act to follow as a driver, but he did have his moments. In this Formula 3 race, victory came in bizarre fashion, very bizarre. His car catapulted across the line backwards. To the relief of Jackie and Helen, he quit driving amid moments like this to manage his own motor racing team.
At the end of the day, I didn't crack it. I wasn't going to be an Ayrton Senna. My record didn't show that I could be a future world champion. And I think if you're being realistic about it and you think, well, if that's not going to happen, or the chances of that happening are very slim, then take another tack.
So Paul Stewart Racing was born. The team has had some outstanding results. It's Paul's show, but Jackie's always on hand to pass on his know-how and experience to the team. Within the next few years, they hope to break into Formula One. So could Paul achieve as a team manager what his father did as a driver?
I would say that I've got the natural savvy, if you like. I've got a lot to learn because I've been a racing driver, if you like. I've been through university, but I have never been a businessman as such. And although it's common sense, really, but there are things I need to learn, I dare say. But I'm enjoying it, and it's all part of life, isn't it? It's all learning.
It's grown from being a one-car, one-driver team now to be 6 cars, 6 drivers, big transporters, 50 people, and probably the most successful racing team of its kind in the world today in the formulas that we participate in. So that's been a terrific magic carpet on its own. And it's been good for Paul, and it's been enjoyable and challenging for me. And the fact that Paul doesn't race anymore is just a great big bonus. We're going to go to that car there. I'm going to leave you all at that car while I take the boys to the gate, and then I'll meet you back there. I would never have been in it had it not been for Paul going into motorsport. I have to say that. I like motorsport very much, but in reality I've spent a lot of my life around motorsport, and it's not something that I need to do a lot more of. In fact, in some cases it stretches whatever else I'm doing in life. But we're trying to create something that's a family unit apart from anything else. I love the sport. I still adore the sport, but I certainly wouldn't be this close to it if it weren't for Paul's interest. Right, now the big problem is the first corner, to see if everybody gets through that. Now they're jump to start. Oh! 2 of them, Dario stalled. Blast! Keep away, keep away, keep away. It's very dangerous, that.
It's a special relationship, quite unique, because we obviously work very closely together, and he puts an enormous amount of time into the team. We're very lucky because we're very close, and there's always a danger in this sort of situation where you get too close and it ends up people falling out. I mean, I would never want to allow that to happen, and I'm sure, and I know my father wouldn't, but we're lucky we've got this balance that works very well.
And at the end of that day at Silverstone, Paul Stewart Racing won the Formula 3 championship. The dice were always loaded against Jackie's other son, Mark, becoming a driver. Of course, he couldn't fail to have the sport in his blood. But neither his mum nor his young wife would have relished all that worry about him, though a career in the cockpit did have its appeal.
One day I was in Indianapolis, and this guy came up to me and said, "So, do you want to be a racing driver?" And I nearly said no, and I suddenly thought, oh, hold on, maybe I do. Maybe I do want to be a racing driver. But, you know, you look around, what I've seen is the cream of the cream. I've seen the top racing drivers, the top teams, and knowing how much it takes to be up there, and seeing how far my father got, not scared of not being able to equal my father's thing. I think the fact is, if I really have wanted to do it, I would have done it.
Mark Stewart is content to be behind the camera. He's in TV, and his recent assignments included filming his own father as he recorded his own personal tribute for a program about a close family friend and TV personality.
I'm proud now of him. I'm proud of what he's done. But I'm still very proud of my father. My father, I think, he's an exceedingly dedicated man. You know, he's dedicated in everything that he does, whether it's business or his family. He has to do it right. He's never done things by halves, and he's done well at doing that. If you, as a company, came to my father and wanted his services, and he agreed to do them, he'd be sure you're going to get your money's worth. And it's the same thing as a son. He's definitely give his his entire time, and he's devoted his life to his family.
Like Paul, Mark is now married. The boys are making their own impact in the world. A far cry from the day when, as toddlers, they told their dad that instead of jetting all over the world driving, he ought to drive their school bus instead. When Jackie and Helen were married, President Kennedy was still alive, and the Beatles were still waiting for their first hit record. They've lived through incredible triumphs and dreadful tragedies, yet Helen still doesn't really know what makes him tick.
Never known him. Well, I'd say all my life, more or less. I don't know. I said to him, I'd love to be inside you once, looking out to see what it looks like. I said, you see things that I don't see. He's got a marvelous mind, and he's a wonderful person to sit down and chat with. He's got great knowledge and understanding of anything and everything. He seems to pick it up very quickly. He wasn't a great academic, but he's got this brilliant mind, and he uses that, and he's sort of, I suppose he was street smart also, but he's very eloquent, and he's a very interesting man. But I don't know what makes him tick. I really don't.
The races that made him a star happened a generation ago, but Jackie Stewart is still aiming high, and in the last part of this special profile, how he's turned himself into a one-man industry.